Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife and to live a more vibrant second half. If you are finding us on YouTube today, please remember to click that subscribe button, ring that bell so you can meet more amazing guests with me. Also, if you're on the podcast platform, please remember to subscribe, rate, and share this conversation. Because today we are going to be talking about pain reduction. My guest helps people live pain-free. Today, Fran Garton, a pain reduction coach and body inclusive trainer, is with us. Fran, thank you so much for being with me today.
Hello, thank you for having me, Gina. I'm so excited to be here.
It is my pleasure. Fran, why don't you give us a little insight as to why pain reduction is your mission?
Because there's no reason that people should be living in pain. There are so many tools, strategies that you can learn and implement that are easy to do. This is really key for me, is the easy part of it. And pain is a multifaceted phenomenon, thing that happens in our bodies. And I think as we get older, we've been conditioned or taught or maybe indirectly led to believe that pain is something that we just have to deal with, and that's just how it goes, and it's just going to get worse as we get older. And I spent many, many years in a lot of pain. I'm talking 15 out of 10 on a daily basis for years. And I was also thinking that it's just the way it is, and I'm just going to have to be like this. And then finally I was like, there has to be something different. There has to be a way to not have so much pain all the time. And so I got myself out of the pain cycle, and I want to teach other people to do that, because it is possible to live without pain. And maybe not, zero pain, but you can definitely bring that down to a 1 or a 2 and live there comfortably. So I really want people to know that even though you get older, even if you have a diagnosis of some kind that causes pain, there are things you can do to minimize it and to actually control it and be in charge of your life rather than letting it control you.
All right. Well, this is a conversation that I'm not necessarily knowledgeable on. So why don't you, Fran, give us an idea of what kind of strategies and tools a person can use to help navigate the pain that they might be living in?
Right. Sure. So the thing about pain is that we often think of it as just a physical thing. And the thing to remember, or maybe to learn, maybe not to remember, maybe to be exposed to this for the first time, is that your brain tells your body that you have pain. Your body does not tell your brain that you have pain. So what I mean by that is, it's like a catalog. Your brain is like a catalog, and it loves to categorize. It likes to have things organized and into little compartments or slots, right? So if I bang my hand, what's going to happen is the signal from the external, the banging, goes through the nerves, up the spinal column, into the brain, and the brain then has to figure out what was that. So it goes through like a card catalog, and it goes through a memory bank, and it goes, oh, have we had this happen before? Is there something that feels, or we've experienced something similar? And the brain goes, yes, we did. We did this like 5 years ago. Okay, let's create the same response. So then the message goes down the spinal column, back through the body, through the nerves, the receptors, and back to that hand that we banged. And I go, ow. So it happens in like milliseconds, right? So it's not conscious, but we think I bang my hand and I feel that. No, my brain tells me that I feel it. And so it's really important to recognize that the pain is based on what we've experienced. And if we haven't experienced, then the brain has to categorize it and give us something to connect to it and to put in some kind of frame of reference, if that makes sense. And so we often think about, if I'll use an example of the shoulder. So if I hurt my shoulder, and you'll hear this I have rotator cuff issues, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying you didn't injure it. Like, there's possible that there's an injury, absolutely. But you have to remember, pain keeps you safe. Pain tells you not to do something or push a little bit harder. So if I've hurt my shoulder and raising my hand above my head causes pain, that is a signal from my body, don't do that. And so then we, as the people who are experiencing the pain, go, oh, I can't lift my arm above my head. Like I can't go too high because it causes pain. So is it an injury? Is it a mechanical thing? So I'm just not moving. And then when I actually try to bring that hand all the way up, the muscles pull. So then it feels like, oh, that's painful. But is it painful or is it discomfort, right? Like, so there are things to think about when we talk about pain, and how it kind of helps and how it manifests in the body. But that's just the physical part. There are so many other components of pain. And I know you asked me, what are the strategies? And I'm going to tell you, but I want people to kind of understand what pain means, because the causes of pain, so an injury, a physical limitation as far as I'm not putting my hand all the way over my head, so the muscles are short and tight, right? Or I could have emotions. Negative emotions cause pain in the body. Yes, food that you eat that's inflammatory causes pain in the body. Pardon me. Not forgiving others causes pain in the body. So it's not just a physical thing. And I think sometimes when we talk about pain, we only think about physical things. So the first thing that I would say as a strategy is to look at what you're eating. And this is the one that I think people have the biggest trouble with. They're like, oh my God, I have to change everything that I eat. Maybe, maybe not. We need to figure out what the triggers are. So I'm gluten-free, I'm dairy-free. Sugar is a huge contributor to pain. So I want you to go back to that example of moving the hand over the head. So if I have sugar, the muscle fibers stick together like Velcro. Our fascia, our connective tissue, is not healthy. So I should be able to move my fingers, move my joints, everything. The muscles should allow me that flexibility. When I have lots of sugar in my body, the fascia, the connective tissue, does not move, it's not flexible, and it sticks. So then when I try and move, I can't. Mm-hmm. So if you can change what you're eating, then that can help reduce the pain. So that's one of the first things that I say with my clients and that I've done myself. Look at inflammatory foods. So there are 5 main inflammatory foods: gluten, dairy, sugar, corn, and soy. Mm-hmm. And so people tend to not want to change what they eat. And I totally understand that. And I'm not saying you have to give everything up. But what I'm saying is it would be a fantastic experiment to pick one of those things. And honestly, I would pick sugar because it's the one that affects the fascia really directly. And just give it up for 2 weeks and see what happens. Treat it like an experiment. Monitor how you feel, because where I was like living at 15 out of 10 for pain, way back then I was like, I'll just take meds and I'll just suffer and it is what it is. And now I live at 0. Like I have 0 pain unless I have something that causes inflammation. So sugar is a perfect example. If I eat something that's sugary, I have pain within 20 minutes and it could last for the whole day. So number 1, look at what you're eating, because that will have a huge impact in your pain level. And it can help in so many ways. Like sugar is, we've talked about this. I'm sure your listeners know about this. I'm sure you know about it. Sugar addiction's worse than heroin. Like one of my clients once said to me, so you're advocating me to do drugs? And I'm like, well, no, I'm not advocating for that. However, if we're talking about pain, give up the sugar because it will reduce your pain. And yeah, I guess if that's your choice, I'm going to say choose the medication, choose the drugs. Don't take the sugar, because the addiction is so strong with sugar and your body doesn't really like the change, right? So number 1 strategy, really look at what you're eating. Keep a food journal, and not a food journal like for weight loss or anything like that. A food journal to know how does your body respond to certain foods. Mm-hmm. And everybody's different, right? Like I know people, I have clients that they can have a little bit of sugar. They're okay with it. It doesn't really affect them. And that's okay. There are other people can't have any. So you need to know what your body likes and how your body responds to different things. Mm-hmm. And the only way to do that is to eliminate it and then see what happens. Because if you've constantly been eating all these foods, you're constantly inflamed. So you don't know what works until you take it out. and then see what happens, if that makes sense.
It does. It's one of those interesting things where you don't know what you don't know. If you've eaten a certain way your entire life, your body is used to being in that state. We've gone through different experiments as a family for different reasons. And it's interesting to me how when you remove something and you kind of clear your system of it, if you will, and then you introduce it back in, what used to be a common feeling, like you didn't notice it per se, you add it back in and you're like, oh, I just don't feel that great. It's like dramatic when you cut it out. Not everything, but certain things can really impact you once you're aware of how they're impacting you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. For the long, many, many years ago, I used to think that I was lactose intolerant. That's what I thought. And I was always having dairy. So it was cheese mostly. I was having cheese, but I was having it with bread. But I always thought that I was lactose intolerant because my grandmother was lactose intolerant, and many times it kind of skips a generation. So it's not, my mother didn't have any problems with it, but my grandmother did. So I thought, oh, okay, so then that's the generation it skipped, right? And I just would limit it, and then I had removed it, but I still had the same reactions, and I'm thinking, what is happening? And I was like, oh, and it didn't even, and the thing is, it doesn't always, you don't always clue into it. You don't always make that connection right away. And then finally I was like, okay, so I've eliminated dairy. I'm not eating cheese. I'm not having yogurt. Why am I still having, and I'm like, oh yeah, I used to put cheese on my sandwiches. Oh, maybe it's the bread. Maybe that's the problem. And then that's the interesting thing, is that it actually ended up being the gluten, not the dairy. So I have dairy once in a while, but generally I don't eat it because my body doesn't really like it. But it wasn't the dairy. It was the gluten, which I didn't realize. I didn't even put two and two together. So it is interesting, like you said, when you do the experiment, you take something out, then you put it in, you're like, oh my gosh, like that. My stomach is not happy about this. Why is that? I've been eating, I ate it for decades, and now all of a sudden my body doesn't like it. No, because your body went, finally, thank you, Gina, for giving that up. We're very happy. And then when you put it back in your system, the body goes, no. Remember the experiment we did for 2 weeks? Let's continue that one because we don't like this. So it's quite interesting when you actually pay attention to it. And, everybody is different. Like I said, for some people, nightshades I thought nightshades were fine. So potatoes, onions, peppers, eggplant. Those are the nightshade family. And for many people, it causes inflammation. If you have arthritis or other conditions that are inflammatory, could be a problem. I'm good with eggplants. Onions are fine. Tomatoes, no. Tomatoes are not my friend. So it's quite interesting because I just kind of thought no nightshades were good for me. And then when I took out the tomatoes, I was like, oh, but I can have the other ones and they're okay. So you do really need to experiment and sort of try things out. But when you're going down that path, I would think sugar would be number one to try and eliminate. If you can't eliminate it completely, then I say 20 grams of sugar a day. That's it. So if you're tracking that and logging it, if you eat a granola bar, you're way over 20 grams. If you have a yogurt that has fruit in it already, that's over 20 grams. So buy the plain yogurt, buy the Greek yogurt, add your own fruit. So there are little tricks that you can do, right? So there's sugar hiding in everything. There's sugar in ketchup and salad dressings and soup and bread. Bread has 1 gram of sugar. Did you know that white bread has 1 gram of sugar? Even the whole wheat stuff and all the multigrain thing, they have sugar. Why do they have sugar? Peanut butter, sugar. So little things like that, like if you actually pay attention to all those little things, you'll find that your 20 grams of sugar add up pretty quickly.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about pain in midlife is a lot of people experience pain during menopause. We have, on top of this food thing, you have the shifts in hormones can, for some women, create some pain, sometimes excessive pain. And it's our bodies are such fine-tuned machines that these changes manifest themselves. And so if you take midlife, menopause, and these food things and you work them out together, you can figure out how to navigate menopause, any pain you did have, any pain you might be having. And it is a little bit of a puzzle, isn't it?
Absolutely. I used to, I remember when I went through menopause, and I went through menopause early, and I used to have hot flashes, and no word of a lie, 11:30 a.m. Because I was leaving, so I worked at home part-time, and then I taught in a classroom part-time. And so I would leave, I'd get ready for work around 11, about 11:30, I'd be leaving the house. And I remember, and I'm not even exaggerating, grabbing all my stuff, I'm at the front door, I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Literally peeling off all my clothes and turning on a fan. And standing in front of the fan with nothing on, my clothes on the floor. Like, I'm ready for work, makeup, hair, all the things are done, right? I'm like, well, I need 10 minutes. Stand in front of the fan until the hot flash passed. And it was every day 11:30. And when I changed my sugar intake, that changed everything for me. It really made a big difference. So your food affects everything. And you have to think about it. You're putting all these things in your body. Your hormones are changing through menopause. Life is changing as you go through menopause. And even if you're in early menopause, like I started menopause in my late 30s, early 40s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was a while. It took me a long time to finally get into it. I was in perimenopause for a very long time, but the food made a huge difference for me, and changing the sugar content in my intake was a huge game changer. So, your life is changing. Your kids have grown up. They might be going to university. Like, there's so many things that change at that time. So look at the things that you can control. So what you're eating is something you can control. Your stress level. Stress causes pain. That's the other thing. So like a strategy that I use and that I use with my clients is I like things to be simple, like I said. So let's think about stress in just two categories, internal and external. And when I talk about internal stressors, those are the things I control. My thoughts, my actions, my words, my mindset, all of the things about me. Things that are external are things that I can't control. So for example, this podcast is a perfect example of an external stressor. I would love you to love this episode. I want your listeners to love this episode. So all I can do is give information that's helpful, come with 150% to give to your audience, and hope that you all love it. In the end, your listeners might go, oh, I don't like her. I don't like Fran. I don't like this episode. I don't like anything that she says. No problem. Like, no problem. I mean, that would hurt me, but I can't control that, right? You might decide, well, I can't believe I had her as a guest. I'm never going to invite her again. Like, I can't control that. So all I can do is control what I bring to the table. We can't control other people. We can't control schedules. We can't control COVID. We can't control how somebody responds. I can control how I respond to things. So when we think about stress, I would say, I would guide people, make a list of all the things that stress you, that you feel cause stress. Then when you made your list, I want you to look at it and you're going to go through it. And if it's external, you're going to put an E beside it. And if it's internal, I want you to put an I beside it. And then the next step is all the things that are external, which I'm 99% positive that will be the majority of your list is external. You're going to cross them all off. And then you get to worry about all the things that are internal, which are the things you can control, right? Like I can't control traffic. I can't control, my boss. Like my boss tells me what to do. I might not like it, but that's the job I have. So either I stay or I leave. Like that's kind of where we're at, right? And I don't have the ability to leave because I need the money. So I need to find a way to not get stressed about the things I don't control. And it sounds very simple, and I know it's not. It's a very difficult thing, but we seem to like to control things, and we cannot control external forces. Like we just can't. So there's no need to stress about that. You got a lot of your own things to stress about that are internal. Let's leave the other stuff to the other people. Let them worry about that, right? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It totally does. There is such power in the way that we perceive and receive information, how we process it, how we put it back out into the world. And that's not to say we can live stress-free. I know that's not what you're saying, but what I hear you saying is that we have the power to shift the way that we choose to categorize what's happening in our lives and how we live it out in our brain by ruminating too much or reliving it, rehashing it, re-upsetting ourselves with it. These things are the things that we can learn to control. You were talking about sugar, and I wanted to say this real quick. Gosh, it's probably been 3 years since I interviewed this woman. And I'm going to put this in the show notes. If you're listening to this podcast, I want you to go back in the archives to this very specific conversation about sugar and addiction. Now, she was talking about people in a treatment center for addiction. But what she learned about sugar, she sold her house like in her 50s and went back to school to get a PhD on food and its effect on addiction. And I think what you were talking about would be a beautiful pairing with that particular podcast. So that's the one thing. That'll be in the show notes, either down below on YouTube or on my website, which I'll give you later. The other thing is, when you're talking about our mindset and genetics, I'm jumping back a couple of things that you said. We are not always we're not always beholden to the genetics and the DNA that we're given. And I think that's a hopeful part too, because like you talked about, well, my grandma had it, so I figured I probably had it. And I've talked to several doctors and they talk about this neuroscience. So the mindset and these, what we think are genetic, must experience situations are not always true. Our lifestyle choices, like you, including the food, but we can flip off those genetic switches and live a healthier, less triggered physically life than we think. We don't have to, back to the mindset, believe everything that we have heard. We don't have to believe everything we tell ourselves. And I think that can cause, like you said, the physical and the mental and the emotional pain, which all causes stress.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's really important. The mindset piece is really important. And, when I work with clients, and even myself through my journey, you have to be ready. Like, that's the mindset piece. I think that is really important. You have to be ready. And so so people that are listening to this episode might be like, yeah, whatever. Right. And it might go back to the one that you referenced on the addiction, which I'm going to actually go listen to because that sounds fascinating. So thank you.
It was so good. I mean, literally
right?
Cute. And so many people have commented on that because what you're saying and that together is going to be a game changer.
But the thing is, you might not be ready for it.
True.
Right? Because you're in a different space. So this is why, as much as I know, and and your listeners probably know this as well, mindset is truly important. And we hear it all the time. But if you are not prepared for that, and you're not ready to do that work and to dive into it, you're not going to get the results that you want. So I like the food thing. That's easy. I can change one thing in my food. One thing. I'll give up sugar for 2 weeks. That's easy. In quotation marks, easy, right? But it's not a hard thing. I don't have to dive deep, because sometimes when we go into the mindset stuff, we're reprogramming, we're retraining ourselves, we're learning new ways of doing things. That's tough work. Stress. Make a list of your stressors, right? Okay, that's very, very black and white. I'm a Virgo. I'm a very grounded person. Like, I like very practical things. So when I look at that list, I can go, I see, look at all those people that stress me out. Yeah, that's external. I can't control them, right? You know what I mean? And it's a very concrete thing. Then once you get the wins and once you get those little successes on those things, then your mind starts to shift on its own, because it sees, oh, my pain goes down when I have less sugar. That's interesting. Oh, okay. That's good. I feel good about that, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're like, okay, let's look at the stress thing. And you're like, oh, yeah, I don't have to respond when I don't have to respond when you say something ridiculous. Just an example. I know you never would, but I'm just saying. You're my person that's here, so you get to be my example, right? But I don't have to engage. If you say something that I don't like, that upsets me, I do not have to engage. And this is another little trick or tip that I give people. If you have that person or people in your life and they always like to I'll use the word dramatic. They're very dramatic and overreact to everything. Yes, everybody, as soon as I say it, everyone has one person that pops in their head. Yeah, you know that person. Okay, good. You got that person in your mind. When they like response.
Yes.
Your job is to not respond. So when you start and your drama person starts going, you're just going to look at them and go, not a word. Just going to nod your head. You're going to go, You're not going to disagree. And it's very difficult because sometimes those people say things that you're like, I just want, like it gets you, right? Like you get, right? But what is the purpose of you responding? You're not going to change their minds. You're never going to convince them that they're wrong or that you're right. So what is the purpose? You're just going to have a disagreement, an argument, and then you're going to go your separate ways and be angry at that person again? Like, what's the end result? Nothing. You're just angry. And that person is like, yeah, I got Gina to react. That's what they're thinking. Subconsciously, that's what they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So you just played right into what they wanted, and they feel great because they got what they wanted, and you're angry. Yeah. Like when you think, and I'm making it very simplistic and very general in the sense of, but I want you to think about, I want your listeners, I want you to think about what is happening when I engage with those kinds of people, because that's what's happening. You just get frustrated. And they go on their merry way till they find the next person, and then they start with that person, right? And then that person gets upset, and they're going, look at me. Like, they're like, this is awesome. They're like on top of the world. They're very happy about what they did and what they said. You're fuming. So then it affects you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So why would you engage? So the strategy is just go, oh. Or you go, yeah. And don't add anything, because what's going to happen, and this is the key, those people need the response. When they don't get it from you, they're going to go somewhere else. So those people will fall away on their own. So even if they're these people that are in your life, but they're very negative, and you're like, oh, I don't want to see that person because this is what's going to, it's going to be a big thing. Don't worry about it. Just don't engage, because eventually they will realize, Gina doesn't really want to do my thing. I want my dance. Like she's not participating, dancing alone, and they're not going to do it anymore. They're just going to go somewhere else, or they will just stop doing that. Right? Like, so it's a very important strategy to not engage. And it's hard because, especially when it's someone who is saying ridiculous things, right? Sometimes you really want to be like, come on, how can you actually say that? Right? How can you believe that? But it's not your job. It's not your job to change somebody else's mind.
It's so funny. I'm thinking of this soundbite from Instagram. Am I the drama? I'm not the drama. Is it me? So what if you're the drama? Maybe, it's something to think about. Sometimes do we look out and we think they're the problem, and we're actually creating our own stress by the way that we show up in the world. It could
Absolutely. Be. Absolutely. And that's what I mean too when I mentioned earlier, Gina, about like the mindset. Like you might not be ready. Like that's a deep dive. Like that's a really big self-reflection piece to kind of go, oh, I am the drama. Oh, okay.
Shoot.
Right? That changes things a little bit when it's like, oh, I always thought it was everybody else is the drama llama. I'm the llama. Like it's me. No offense to llamas. I love llamas. They're awesome animals. And then the other tip that I would say about stress, which I think is really important, is that many times I feel that we use stress as the label for everything. Yeah. For every situation. And so what I would say is if you're like, okay, I feel stressed. Okay, I want you to stop yourself and I want you to ask yourself, is that truly the emotion you feel? Or are you angry? Are you frustrated? Are you upset? Are you sad? Do you want to cry? Do you want to scream at like, what is truly the emotion that's happening? Because I think that stress is it's a big buzzword, and it has been for quite a long time. And especially since COVID came around, I think stress and burnout have become very popular terms. Not that they're not real, because they absolutely are. But is that really what you're feeling? Or do you just feel frustrated with somebody? Because that's different, because my response for stress could be very different than my response for being angry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you're feeling angry, but you say that it's stress, well, then your response that you are giving or you're allowing to happen is not what you need in a situation when you feel angry or when you feel sad, right? Mm-hmm. And so then you're not actually responding and giving yourself what you need because your response is not adequate to the emotion that's really happening. So ask yourself, what is the emotion that you really are feeling? And if it's stress, fine, then you deal with it. But if it's something else, it'll have a different response. So I think that that's an important distinction as well.
And as you're talking, it's coming to mind that when we say, I feel stressed, you're telling your brain you feel stressed. So we're talking to ourselves. We're telling our body what to feel. So you're talking about stepping back and really looking at yourself almost outside of yourself and identifying things. And we could use words like, I'm just feeling frustrated, or I'm really disappointed. Not like I'm mad, I'm stressed, oh, I have anxiety. You know, we jump to such dramatic conclusions sometimes when our emotions are high and hot. When if we could, old school, count to 10, take 10 really deep breaths and get a grip, because we are sometimes causing more stress. Back to am I the drama? When we label something so quick and then we tell ourselves over and over and over, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, because that's causing stress, isn't it?
Absolutely it is. And the thing too, you got to think about, and this is where, you know, it's not so straightforward, and it's not a simple thing. Like our minds, like the subconscious mind is so important. The subconscious mind wants you to have whatever you want. Whatever you ask for, it gives you. So you're like, I'm stressed, and subconscious mind, I give you all the things that cause stress. No problem. You're going to have traffic. Your kids are going to misbehave. You're going to argue with your partner. You're not going to have a good day at work. Like all the things, or you're going to spill coffee on your way to work. Like all the things that will cause you to be upset. Your subconscious mind goes, I got you. Let me give you all the stress. I got all the stress for you, right? Because that's what happens. And sometimes I think we forget about that. We forget about what we want. Like when we think about stress, it's interesting because a couple of days ago I got hacked on Facebook. Someone sent me a message and they're like, oh my God, did you send a friend request and you've been hacked and blah, 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 and this and that. And I was just like, yeah, well, okay. I'll report it to Facebook, and what are they going to do? And I had people message me and they're like, oh my God, like, are you? And it was like this message that I'm reading, and I could hear the panic in their voice as I'm reading their words. And I was just like, nah, means I'm popular and I'm fantastic. That's why I got hacked. I don't know if that's the case, but that was the mindset and my perspective that I chose to be. You know what? I reported it. What can I do? Nothing. Right. I just think I'm popular. I think what I'm saying is very important. And so someone's like, I need to be her. So we're going to hack everything. That's what I think happened. So that was sort of my perspective. And a couple people were like, oh my God, you must be so worried. And what if they shut you down? Well, if they shut me down, they shut me down. If they close my account, they're like, what am I going to do? Like external stressor. I have no control. What is my job? Report it. Done. And tell everybody not to accept my request. That's it. There is no other thing that I can do. So for me to worry is kind of useless, because there's nothing. I'm just going to worry. Yes. I'm just stressed about something that I have no control over. So I did what I could, and off we go. Yeah.
Isn't that funny? It is a world of information, and there is a lot of pressure, and there are a lot of moving parts. You know, there was a time when people like worked on their farm and had their kids, and they went to church on Sunday, and they had the stressors within that environment. But we are being bombarded with the world. And I think if our physical bodies are out of balance and pain is something that we're living with, I think everybody needs to manage these things. But you're talking about when someone's living with pain, how much more important is it to navigate these things coming in, these stressors that you're talking about? Because the goal is to get back to stasis in our bodies. That's what you help people do. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to know what are the things that cause to have the pain in the body. Like you need to know. And the thing is that you can't just do one piece.
Right.
Like, I'm sure that you have done this on your journey, and I'm sure many of your listeners on their journey, because I've done it on mine. You do all the work, you go through the things. It sucks. Some days are hard days, right? Like they are, because it's emotional. You're going through these things. We're relearning. We're doing forgiveness work. We're doing acceptance. We're all these things that we're doing, right? Changing our mindset. And you do all this work, and it could be years. And you're like, okay, I feel good, right? I've got there. I'm there, right? I got through it. And then something happens, and there's a trigger. And then you're like, again, I remember this. It happened to me about 6 months ago. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Universe, I did this work. I've done this work. I spent 5 years doing this work. And universe was like, yeah, but that was just a couple of levels. We got another level of that. There's another layer of that. I'm like, oh, you're kidding me. But the good thing is, because you did some of the work already, that next layer of it, you're like, okay, yeah, it might be a little uncomfortable, might suck a little bit.
Yeah.
But I've done really hard stuff already.
Yes.
So I can do this one. It's okay. Like I can do it. I can get through it because you've already been through stuff. And I think that that's the other thing that people need to remember is that, and this is something I give my clients, so I recommend this to everybody. Get out a piece of paper, and I want you to write down every single accomplishment that you've done in your life. Everything you've achieved. Did you graduate from high school? That's an accomplishment. Did you read a book series that had 10 books in it? Like what's the
Harry Potter? Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, Harry Potter. That's 7 books. And what was the one? Game of Thrones.
Oh.
Those books? Oh, good Lord. Those books are like 900 pages. You got through all 5 books? That goes on your accomplishment list as far as I'm concerned. It's too many. I love to read, but too much. But you know what I mean? Like, make a list of these things and literally keep that list, stick it on your wall. And when you have days that you're like, oh my gosh, I got to do this work. I got to go through this mental. Yeah. Well, look at all the things you did. You birthed children. How about that? You grew and raised human beings. That's an accomplishment. No, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
You lost people. That's an accomplishment. Like, there's so many things that we take for granted that we do, that we think are simple. You went to a job interview and got a job. That's a big deal. Like, we think it's not a big deal. It is. And I think it's important that we have that list so that when you're doing the work and you're going through the hard times and that other layer comes up and you're like, oh, come on, man, get the list out and look through the list and kind of go, oh, okay, well, I've done all these things. I can do this thing. I can get through this. It'll be tough, but I can do it. So I think it's a good reminder to keep that list around and just kind of go through it, whether you keep it on your phone or you write. I like paper so I can stick it up and look at it. But just kind of remind yourself of all the hard things that you've done, because we've done a lot of hard things in our life. And I think we forget about them. And they're even little ones, we forget about them.
And it's so good to remember that we can do hard things. I didn't say we wanted to. That's a different conversation.
Yes.
But, there's a book that I was listening to. It's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Great book.
Oh my gosh. Intense book though.
Yes.
Like it can catch you outside. Like you're like, wow. So I listen to it in moments when I'm like, okay, I'm ready to see what's next, So if for those of you who are listening or watching and don't know what this is, the premise is that our bodies are storage houses for our memories, our traumas, and things like that. So I have a friend, she's a fitness trainer. She was abused for many years by her husband, and one of her biggest trigger points in her body was her lower back. Mm-hmm. That's where the pain manifested itself when she was triggered. When I was triggered from growing my formative years in an abusive home, my mom was abused by my stepfather. That was my gut. If I was triggered, it was my gut. And now that I've done that work, triggers have moved up into my chest. And I think it's very interesting, and I would like to talk about it briefly with you, Fran, is the body does keep the score. It's not like we tend to think our brain is where everything goes. That's where it's processed. But our body is actually, the cells of our body have a memory. Yeah. we're literally talking on a cellular level that these memories, these traumas, these difficult things are trapped kind of in parts of our body. So pain, to make it more complicated, as we do this hard work that you're talking about, we may feel pain as we are releasing these memories and these traumas. At least that's how I understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I have so everybody, I'm sure, you all have a spot in your body, and mine's my right low back, not across the whole low back, but just the right side. And I call it my stress spot, because if I feel, and I'm using the word stress, I'll put it in quotation marks because it's not necessarily stress, but I call it my stress spot. There will be times that I'm going through my day and my day is fine. I'm having a great day. Everything's good. I'm happy. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, like what? Why do I feel this in my low back on the right side? Like I feel like it feels like it tightens and it aches, right? And I'm like, oh, what's that all about? And to me, that is my notification from my body. Something is happening. Emotionally, there is something, whether that's a release coming, or whether I'm reliving something, or there's some kind of thing in the back of my brain. I haven't really, it hasn't come to the front where I'm like actually conscious of it. It's way back here. It's like a little nugget, and it's kind of brewing, you know what I mean? Like a storm. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, what is happening? So if you can identify the part of your body, and you're right, it does move. It absolutely moves. But if you can identify that, then I would say, okay, when that happens, like literally stop and kind of go, okay, what is going on? Because for me, when it happens and I don't actually feel overwhelmed and I'm having a good day, I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is happening here? Maybe it's a residual from, weeks ago, that all of a sudden now my body, my heart, my soul is ready to deal with that thing from 3 weeks ago. Because I wasn't ready at that point, and my body goes, okay, we're ready now, let's do this. And I go, okay, let's do this. So it's kind of interesting when you think about how the body responds, because it really does respond, and it does store that memory. And I think that when we're dealing with pain, when we're dealing with any kind of change that we're making in our lives, we can't just say, okay, it's only mental, or it's only spiritual, or it's only physical. There is everything. There are all the pieces, and you cannot get through it unless you address all of the pieces. And so that's the one thing that I noticed too when I work with people. I had a client once told me, we started coaching. She goes, I'm not doing forgiveness work. And I said, okay, but can I ask you why? And she goes, this is what she said. And so this is an important statement, because when you're angry with people and you don't forgive them, many people have this thought pattern. They deserve for me to be angry at them. And I said, okay, like I'm not excusing anybody's actions. However, you holding on to that hurts you. It doesn't hurt the other person.
They don't feel it at all.
They don't care at all. And if you think about people, like you mentioned, abuse that you went through, and some other people that that have gone through, I have close friends that have gone through various abusive situations. That abuser doesn't care.
Nope.
At all. Like, and I'm not minimizing it, because it's a horrible experience to have gone through. I can't imagine. I have not gone through it myself. But when
you keep the anger, think of it this way: they win because they do care if you're upset about it.
Absolutely, but they don't care that you're angry at them. They don't care. They're narcissistic. They want to. They don't care. Right? It's about them and how they don't care how they make people feel. They're in charge. They're the big, you know what I mean? So when you think about it, and I said to her, okay, but you understand that you're going to only get so far. And she goes, yep, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Okay, no problem. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see. So
I go this far, and you're like, well, we're there.
Well, no. So what happened? I want to show. So what happened was we were doing 12 weeks together. So we got about halfway through, and we were on a call, and she says to me, I said, how are you today? She goes, I don't like you. And I'm like, well, I don't know what happened, because I haven't seen you for a week, but okay, let's open this up and see what happened. She goes, it's all you. I blame you entirely for this. And I'm thinking to myself, oh man, like what? I have power. I haven't seen her for 7 days, and I got got powers. Like, I don't know what's going on, but let's see. Right. And I said, okay, tell me what happened. She goes, I was going to a family event and we were all together. And then one of my family members started telling this story. And it was a story about when they were younger and they were commenting on how she looked. And they had old photo albums and they brought out this photo album and there was a picture of her, and her family, she remembers this event happening, commented on how she looked, and negatively.
Okay.
Negatively, not positive, negatively. And she said it was a big trigger for her then, and then she kind of forgot about it. She goes, but the work with you and talking to you made me feel the same way in that moment when I was there with them on the weekend that I did when it happened like decades ago. And I said, okay, but why? She goes, because you got me thinking about these people and how they made me feel and the forgiveness. And I was like, but that's the process, right? To go through it. Yeah. And she was just like, I don't want to go through it. And I said, why? She goes, because they were mean. I go, yes, they were mean. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging how they were, but do you want to hold that forever? She goes, no, because I'm angry. I go, then we need to let this go. Like, we need to go through this, right? She said, I don't want to go through it. I said, why? She goes, because it's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Of course it's uncomfortable. She goes, then I have to feel. Yeah, you do, because you didn't feel it 3 decades ago when it happened. She goes, but I don't want to. I go, you don't have to do it, but it might be a good idea. And I feel that your body, your mind, your soul is maybe ready for you to start moving forward with that. And she's like, so I guess this means we're doing forgiveness work. And I'm like,
are we?
Are we? That's exactly what I said. Are we? She goes, yes, let's unpack this. So we did, and we had a really great session. And she kind of came to a few realizations. And the thing that I said to her is, you have kids, right? So do you want your kids to have this? Like, do you want your kids in their 40s to be doing what you're doing in your 40s? Because they haven't had a good role model. They haven't had good lessons to learn on how to respond and deal with these kinds of situations. And she's like, well, absolutely. I don't want my daughter to feel like I feel now. I go, good. So then we're going to work through this so that you can teach your daughter a healthy way to if something like this were to happen to her, and how does she navigate that? Because otherwise she's going to be doing this work with my daughter when they're 40. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to be working through this. She goes, yeah, that's a good point. So I always try and remind people, you're teaching your children and the people around you in your life how to respond and deal with things. And so if you're not responding and dealing with them in a healthy way, they're not going to. So you're the model. So that's really important. And I think, and like I said, it was interesting because she was like, I'm not doing it. And then halfway through, she's like, okay, let's do this now. Let's get through it. And we did a lot of forgiveness work. It's hard work, right? But you have to come I believe you have to come to terms with things that happened in your past.
Well, because the body does keep the score, pain can be multi-layered, which is the point that we've been discussing. You can start with the simple things, and it is simple when you talk about food versus emotions.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
You got to baby step your way toward the big dog,
Well, that's exactly, because it's a muscle, right? Like you're going through the process, whatever component you're doing, whether it's the pain or the forgiveness or the whatever it is. It's a process, and it's like a muscle. You can't, like, I'm not going to go and pick up 100-pound weight because I haven't picked up a 5-pound weight. Like, how can I possibly do that? You have to work through it. You have to teach your body. Like you said, the body remembers. You teach the body how to deal with it. And then every time it gets a little bit easier, and you can do a little bit more, and you can get a little deeper. And then I think it's a journey, right? You're always on this journey. It never ends. That's the unfortunate thing, I think. Or fortunate, I don't know. A journey is always nice, right? It's the journey, not the destination, right? Isn't that the expression? So just go through the journey, because it is going to happen. In every phase or season of your life, there'll be something different or something new that comes up that you're like, I thought I dealt with that. Well, you did, but that was the 5 years ago you. This is the now you. So there's it's different now, and you change and you respond to things differently than you used to.
Yeah. So we have already been talking for almost 50 minutes. Amazing. Such good conversation and so much more that could be said. This I know to be true. But let's anchor into 3 things, Fran, that you want people to take away or that you want to gift them to start this journey of pain reduction, pain management, whatever it is that's on your heart. What are those 3 things?
Well, I would say when it comes to pain, there are so many layers of pain. So I really, that book that you recommended, The Body Keeps the Score, is a fantastic resource. It really is. I strongly encourage people to pick it up, whether it's the physical copy or the audio book. It's a great read and it will change. There are lots of things out there on pain, but it is a really good resource. It's been recommended by lots of people that I know that are in the pain field. There's so many components. So do a little research on what's going on with pain. Number 2, be open and receptive to what comes to you.
Yeah.
Yep. Because that's a challenge too sometimes, right? And we don't necessarily want to be open because we like things to stay the way that they are. We don't like change. And then my 3rd thing, which is exactly that, change is inevitable. Our whole entire life is change. And if you are constantly fighting against change, you are never going to be happy with anything. Change is a constant. So take it as it comes, deal with what you can, and everything else, just let it go. Because it really is a matter of perspective shift. And look at change as a good thing. We're in fall right now. The leaves, I was driving home today and I was like, man, look at all the oranges and reds. And they were like that 2 days ago, right? But it's beautiful. Because then winter comes and then we get spring and then we get like the seasons change all the time. Like everything changes. It's a good thing. So just embrace change.
Awesome. Now, how can people find you, Fran?
They can find me on Instagram. Fran Garton Pain Coach is where I am. And they can reach out to me, DM me. I'd love to chat further about any of these things and help people, navigate pain and live pain-free because it's totally possible to do.
And what's your website?
Website is frangartoncoaching.com.
Awesome. Well, Fran, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and having such an enriching conversation about something that's so common in all of our lives. And it is deep and wide. There's so many things. So I want to thank you for taking the time of bringing your wisdom, your knowledge, your passion to help people live pain-free to my tribe today. I'm so grateful that you brought it, and you brought it so clearly and so impactfully. But, you have a way, I think, of introducing a piece of information, and you're just like, what do you think about this? And whatever the word is for that, I love that about you. That's a really great way to communicate something that is hard and people struggle. So thank you for being gracious in that way.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, friends, today, if you are on YouTube, if you just look down below, I will have these links to Fran there. Don't forget to subscribe. If you are on the podcast, please head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 298. I will have links to Fran there. Remember that Fran Garton is a pain reduction coach. She is passionate about helping you live a life that's pain-free on every level, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. So if you need help with that, please take the time to reach out to her. And remember that pain is something we all experience, and we do not have to just live with it. We can do things to navigate and to manage and to almost eliminate. On some things, elimination is absolutely a possibility. So please don't lose hope if you find yourself in pain today. Reach out for resources, get the help you need, and find a more pain-free life. We hope that this conversation is the beginning of a journey to joy, peace, and pain-free living. So thank you so much for listening with us today, for joining us. I look forward to bringing more inspiration, more powerful strategies, and people into your lives in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.